Imagine if I told you there's a mindset quietly shaping your decisions, your relationships, even your income potential, and most people don't even realize they have it. It's called the main character syndrome, and at first it feels powerful, like you're the center of your own movie. Your story matters. Your feelings come first. Your perspective is the truth. But here's the uncomfortable reality. The same mindset that makes you feel important can slowly destroy your growth, your relationships, and even your ability to succeed in the real world. Today, we're breaking it down not as a trend, not as a joke, but from a psychological perspective. Why it happens, how it shows up in everyday life, and why it might be holding you back more than you think. What is main character syndrome? Let's get one thing clear. Wanting your life to matter? That's healthy. Having goals, dreams, and a sense of identity? Also healthy. But main character syndrome is different. It's when someone starts to believe, often unconsciously, that everything revolves around them, that their experiences are more significant than others, that their emotions carry more weight, that they are always the central focus, even when they're not. Psychologically, this ties into something called egocentric bias. It's the natural human tendency to rely too heavily on our own perspective and assume others see the world the same way we do. In small amounts, it's normal. We all do it. But when it grows unchecked, it creates a distorted reality. You begin to interpret neutral situations as personal. You assume people are thinking about you more than they actually are. You expect special treatment without realizing it. And slowly, your world becomes smaller, not bigger. How it starts, and why it's more common now. This didn't just appear overnight. There's a reason why more people, especially younger generations, are experiencing this mindset. Social media. Think about it. Every day, you're encouraged to post your life, curate your image, track likes, views, and attention. You become both the actor and the audience of your own life. And over time, your brain starts linking attention with value. If people are watching me, I matter. If people agree with me, I'm right. If I'm not being noticed, something's wrong. This creates a subtle but powerful shift. Instead of living your life, you start performing it. Instead of experiencing moments, you start framing them. And without realizing it, your sense of self becomes dependent on how central you feel in the narrative. Signs you might have it. Now this is where it gets real. Because main character syndrome doesn't show up in obvious ways. It's not always arrogance or loud behavior. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it looks like this. You overanalyze conversations, thinking, did they mean something about me? You assume people notice your mistakes far more than they actually do. You feel disappointed when situations don't go the way you expected, even if others are involved. You struggle when you're not the focus of attention. You interpret delays, silence, or disagreements as personal rejection. And here's the tricky part. It feels justified. Because from your perspective, your thoughts and emotions are real. They matter. They're intense. But the problem isn't that you feel things deeply. The problem is assuming your perspective is the only one that matters. The hidden cost. At first, this mindset feels empowering. But over time, it comes with consequences. In relationships, it creates tension. Because when you're always the main character, other people become side characters. Their struggles feel smaller. Their needs feel secondary. Their boundaries feel inconvenient. And people notice that. Not immediately, but eventually. You may start hearing things like, you make everything about yourself. You don't really. Listen. You always take things personally. And that's when frustration builds on both sides. Now let's talk about growth. Because this mindset doesn't just affect relationships, it affects success. When you see yourself as the center of everything, feedback feels like an attack. Criticism feels unfair. Failure feels personal. So instead of adapting, you defend. Instead of learning, you justify. And that stops progress completely. Because real growth requires one uncomfortable thing. Accepting that you're not always right. Why your brain does this? Here's where the psychology gets deeper. Your brain is wired for survival, not accuracy. It prioritizes your experiences because, from a biological standpoint, You are the center of your world. Everything you see, feel, and process is filtered through your own mind. So naturally, your brain gives your thoughts more importance. It's efficient. It saves energy. But in modern life, this becomes a problem. Because survival today isn't about reacting fast. It's about understanding others, adapting, and thinking beyond yourself. And if your brain keeps pulling you back into me-first thinking, it limits your ability to connect, collaborate, and grow. The illusion of control. One of the most dangerous parts of main character syndrome is the illusion it creates. It makes you believe you have more control over situations and people than you actually do. You think, if I do this, they'll react this way. If I say this, they'll understand me. If I feel this strongly, it must be true. But reality doesn't work like that. People have their own internal worlds, their own fears, their own priorities. And most of the time, they're not thinking about you at all. Not in a negative way, just not at the center. And that realization can feel uncomfortable because it challenges the story your brain has been telling you your entire life. Because the answer isn't to think less of yourself. It's to see the world more clearly. The shift from center to awareness. Here's where most people get it wrong. They think the solution to main character syndrome is to be less confident or stop caring about themselves. That's not just wrong. It's dangerous. The goal isn't to shrink yourself. The goal is to expand your awareness. Psychologically, this is called perspective taking, the ability to step outside your own mental frame and genuinely consider what someone else might be thinking or feeling. And this is where real power begins. Because the moment you stop assuming everything revolves around you, you start seeing things others miss. You notice patterns in behavior. You understand motivations. You read situations more accurately. And suddenly, life becomes less confusing. The spotlight effect. Let's talk about one of the biggest illusions fueling this mindset. The spotlight effect. This is the belief that people are paying way more attention to you than they actually are. You think everyone noticed your mistake. Everyone remembers that awkward moment. Everyone is judging your choices. But in reality, most people are too busy thinking about themselves, just like you are. Studies in psychology consistently show that we dramatically overestimate how much others notice us. That means the embarrassment you replay in your head for hours probably didn't even register for someone else. And this realization can be freeing, because it removes pressure. You don't have to perform all the time. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to control every perception. You just have to show up and improve. Why this matters for success. Now let's connect this to something practical, success. Because this isn't just about mindset, it's about results. In business, careers, and even content creation, the people who grow the fastest are not the ones who see themselves as the main character. They're the ones who understand the audience. They ask, what does the other person need? What problem am I solving? How can I make this valuable for someone else? While others are focused on being seen, they're focused on being useful. And usefulness is what creates value. Value leads to trust. Trust leads to opportunities. Opportunities lead to income. So ironically, the less you center everything around yourself, the more the world starts to reward you. Relationships change everything. Now let's bring it back to relationships, because this is where the shift becomes visible. When you move away from main character syndrome, something subtle changes. You start listening more than reacting. You ask questions instead of making assumptions. You become curious instead of defensive. And people feel that. They feel understood. And being understood is one of the most powerful human experiences. It builds deeper connections. It reduces conflict, creates trust. And here's the part most people don't expect. When you stop trying to be the center of attention, people naturally start valuing your presence more. Not because you demand it, but because you earn it. Practical reset. How to break the pattern. So how do you actually apply this? Not in theory, but in daily life. Start with this simple shift. Pause before interpreting. The next time something happens, someone doesn't reply, A conversation feels off, a plan changes. Don't immediately make it about you. Instead, ask, what else could this mean? Train your brain to generate multiple explanations, because the first explanation your mind gives you is usually the most self-centered one. Second, practice intentional listening. When someone speaks, don't just wait for your turn to respond. Focus on understanding. Repeat their point in your own words if needed. Sounds simple, but it rewires how you engage with people. Third, separate feelings from facts. Just because something feels personal doesn't mean it is. Emotions are real, but they're not always accurate. Learning to question them without ignoring them is a skill that changes everything. The real main character. Here's the irony in all of this. When you let go of main character syndrome, you don't become less important. You become more effective. Because real life isn't a movie. There's no script, no guaranteed spotlight, no audience watching your every move. But there is something better. There's influence, there's growth, there's impact. And those things don't come from being the center of attention. They come from understanding the bigger picture. So maybe the goal isn't to be the main character. Maybe the goal is to be someone who actually understands the story. If this shifted your perspective even a little, then you're already ahead of most people. Because awareness is where change starts. Drop a comment and tell me, have you ever caught yourself thinking this way? And if you want more content that breaks down psychology, mindset, and real-world success without the fluff, make sure you subscribe and stay connected. Because the next shift might be the one that changes everything.